Welcome to sunny Yorkshire. So, as most of you will know, I've been a massive fan of the Urus since launch. I've owned one myself ever since the beginning, and I'm asked all the time, what's it like against the RS Q8? So today we're going to have a look at both cars and let's see what we think. So, looking at the cars themselves, they are both based on the same chassis. They both have the same engines. The silhouette of the car is similar, but when you see them side by side, you can really tell the difference. Both of these cars have got the optional 23-inch wheels. On the Audi, this has got the optional red brake calipers, so it's only red or black, whereas the Urus gets those massive, wonderful carbon ceramic brake discs, largest brake discs fitted to any road car, and you can choose the colour. That's what makes it a Lamborghini. You can have green, you can have orange, you can have yellow, you can have whatever you want. That's what makes it Lamborghini. Okay, so more importantly, what everyone wants to know is what are these two cars like to drive? So the first car I'm in is the RS Q8. So let's start it up. Great V8 soundtrack. So this has got the 600 horsepower. Both cars have the 4-litre V8 twin turbo. Like I said, this being the 600 brake horsepower version, and it's 650 horsepower in the Urus. So one of the first things you notice driving this car in its normal settings is how fantastic the ride is. Very, very supple ride. It's not harsh, it's not crashy. The car is very, very refined, very quiet. I mean, this is a car that you could drive everywhere all day. I think it's notable actually. I've recently just been driving a Range Rover Sport, and I've come out of that. When you jump into this, you actually realise how advanced the suspension has got. You know, if you're jumping out of something like an SVR into a car like this, you will notice the improvement in ride quality. Okay, settings. So we've got an efficient mode, a comfort mode, and a dynamic mode. And then we've also got RS mode, so you can actually choose how you want to set the car up. So I'm just driving normally now, so I'm going to choose one of the RS modes, which puts us into the firmest suspension setting, most active throttle response. And let's see what this car feels like. So in RS mode, the exhaust is a little bit louder, you can hear that. Slightly muted, but you still know it's a roaring V8. That twin turbo engine, this is one of the few cars that actually is better for having forced inductions. I'm a massive fan of naturally aspirated engines. I'm not a fan of turbos at all, but in this car, this 4-litre V8, which is used in the Porsche models, in Bentley and what have you, and obviously it's used in the Lamborghini, it really does work because you get that low down torque all of the time. So in a car like this, that you don't necessarily want to rev to 9,000 revs, it really does work and it is better for it. And the performance, I mean, there's not a lot more that you need from a car. Wow, fantastic performance. So let's just accelerate from this corner. Oh, wow, the performance is unbelievable. Wow, all the performance, all the power, all the time. Loads of grip, that's what this car's all about. It's really, really good. So, handling. The RS Q8 and the Lamborghini both have rear wheel steering. So, under cornering, that shortens the wheelbase, and you really, really can feel it on a tight country road or going around a roundabout. The agility of this car is absolutely fantastic for the size of car. It's got all the fancy anti-roll stuff as well, so it doesn't roll. So the levels of grip, the levels of performance you can extract from this car is more than you can in most sports cars, because it can put the power down, and even though it's a big SUV, it really does handle and grip amazingly well. Okay, so the ergonomics in the car. The dashboard on this car is very similar to most Audis. It's great because it works like an Audi and it looks like an Audi, but in the RS Q8, it's fine. It's functional. It's good. The seats, I actually think these are the same seats that are in the Urus. Very supportive, very comfortable, loads of adjustment. It's got all the technology you expect. It's got Apple CarPlay, it's got 3D cameras, but that's not what we're talking about today. It's about the drive. That's what's interesting. One thing I do like on the RS Q8 is you get the Alcantara steering wheel. Now on the Urus you can't get that. You actually get a suede steering wheel, which is fine for about the first 30 seconds, but it does start to wear. So when you're driving this car in normal settings, it really does feel like any normal SUV. It's as quiet and comfortable as a Range Rover. performs as well, if not better, than an SVR or a Cayenne. So I really think the RS Q8 is one of the new car of the moment that really have moved the game on. So I think if you were considering this car against the Porsche Cayenne or the SVR, I do think this is a great alternative, and probably actually slightly better. Now, although this is a sports SUV and a coupe version of a sports SUV, to be boring for a second, the practicalities are very, very good. Huge boot, loads of space in the back, comfortable up front. Again, if you're comparing this to something like a Range Rover Sport or a Cayenne, there's so much more room in this car. It is a big car. I mean, you know that when you park it, but it is a practical car. I have to say, I am very, very impressed with this car. Now, obviously, I've driven Urus for quite some time now, so I know how good that car is. I thought I may have been disappointed with this car, but I have to say, I think because of the engine and the handling, because of the rear wheel steering, this is very, very, very good. I think if you wanted a car for everyday driving and you maybe only had one SUV at home, I think this would be a great car, a great alternative. A car that you could drive every day. It's subtle enough to not be in anybody's face, enough performance that you could ever need. And also, I mean, the downside of the Urus is the fact that it does attract a lot of attention, whereas this car will morph into society a little bit better than a Lamborghini. So anyway, interestingly, is this as good as a Urus? Well, I'll jump in the Urus next and I'll let you know. So we're now in the Urus. Let's see how it compares to the RS Q8. Now, the first thing you notice with the Urus, the drama begins right from the beginning. You've got the start-stop button. You open it up like a fighter jet starter button. Nice bark from the exhaust, slightly louder than the RS Q8. When you put the car into gear, you have to use the upshift pedal to put the car into drive. Again, that's the same as any Lamborghini sports car, any Ferrari sports car. So you really do feel that you've just gone up into a super SUV just the second that you start the car and put it into gear. So let's set off, let's see how it drives. So the Urus, 650 brake horsepower, same engine, just slightly different mapping. And one of the first things you do notice in the Lamborghini, that exhaust note, it's just a little bit raspier. You get a little bit of a back pop on the overrun, and that's in normal mode. So we're in Strada now. To be honest, when you're in Strada, the difference between the RS Q8 and the Lamborghini, it's very, very small. I mean, if I close my eyes now, I'd struggle to tell you which car I was driving, to be honest. But where the differences come, where this becomes a Lamborghini, is when you put it into Corsa, when you put it into that track mode. If I just put that down now, the whole car personality changes. The exhaust note's aggressive, the gear change is aggressive, and the handling firms up. It really does take this car to another level altogether. But if I just come down the gearbox now and just accelerate and just listen to that, and the gear change just bangs you in the back. Yeah, for a car of this size, it feels like a supercar. It really, really does. And under normal driving on normal UK roads, for me, I get as much pleasure out of this car as what I would out of a sports car, because it grips and it handles. Whereas something like if I jump in a 488 or a Hurricane or something, I'm always acutely aware of the road conditions and what have you, and you've got to be careful with the throttle. Whereas this car, you can just put all the power down all the time, but it does move around as well. I mean, in Corsa, on cold tyres on a wet road, this car properly moves around. You can get a load of oversteer with it. I won't do that today, obviously, we'll leave that for the track, but that's what makes this a super SUV. I think how I would describe this compared to the RS Q8 is an RS Q8 is like a GT3, great performance, really good for what it does, but this is a GT3 RS, just everything is just toned that little bit more aggressive, little bit more performance, little bit more noise. And I think that's what makes this car worth that bit more money. It's just, it brings something that no other car outside of a supercar can bring. Because if you're in the mood on the day and you want 9/10 of a supercar performance and noise, you can only get it from a Urus. It's unbelievable. If you look at the instruments, the dials are the same in Corsa as what they would be in an Aventador or a Hurricane. You know you're in something special. You really, really do. I like the dashboard better in the Urus because, again, it's not the same as any other production car. You've got the vents. It's a bit more like being in a cockpit rather than just in a car. Whereas, yes, the touch screens are the same as the Audi. Yes, some of the controls are the same as the Audi. But for me, that just makes it work. That's the only benefit of that, because you get all the technology that they spend billions of pounds doing on ADAS systems and what have you. So you get the benefits of it in the car. I have to say, in the Audi, the ambient lighting is better, and that's standard, whereas in the Lamborghini it's about £2,000 or £3,000 options, so you pay for it and it's still not as good. But it's just a small thing. Little details set this car apart from the Audi. For example, the shifter paddles. In the Audi, they're small, they're plastic, like they would be in any other Audi, but in the Lamborghini, they're big, they feel great, they're made of metal, and they look amazing. Touch and feel, it's all about touch and feel. And the ceramic brakes on this car, again, another area where it stands out. I've actually been lucky enough to drive a Urus on track, and believe me, to have a car of this weight, with this performance, with these brakes, is just quite unbelievable. I have to say there is some slight downsides with the ceramics. When they're cold, they can be a little bit noisy, a little bit screechy. If you've been doing a long motorway drive in the wet, sometimes when you decide to brake when you come to a junction, they don't always work immediately until they're warmed up. But to be honest, for the performance you get the rest of the time, and obviously they look cool, and the unsprung mass. I mean, we say about ceramics about the fact that they don't leave brake dust and whatever, which is great, but the actual technical side of it, the unsprung mass, you can feel on the steering on the Urus, it is a little bit lighter and a little bit sharper. Kind of feels a little bit Ferrari-like, it's quite darty, the steering. And I think part of that is having the ceramics, having those lighter ceramics. Should we go under a tunnel? Let me put it into Corsa, manual. Right, just nothing about it, just have a little listen to this. Oh! Like a gunshot! Driving slowly now, and just listen to the engine. I mean, it sounds guttural. It's almost as if they've drilled a massive hole by your throttle pedal, so you can just hear the engine directly underneath you. I mean, it's just like, wow. Just listen to that. Who needs a supercar when you got one of these? So what are the downsides to the Urus? Well, obviously the extra cost, the availability, and sometimes, because these are daily driver cars, sometimes the attention can get a little bit too much. You know, you only need to go for fuel and you probably have 3 or 4 people who want to talk to you about the car, which is all good. I mean, it's all positive, but you know, sometimes you don't want the attention. So, you know, that is the downside. Yeah, what's the upside? You can tell everyone you drive a Lamborghini. That's worth 100 grand, isn't it? The only other downside is Urus does sound a little bit like a word for a bottom. So you've always got to say you drive a Lamborghini, not someone's bottom. If you could only have one car, and you love cars, and you have a family, I mean, both of these cars will do that. They give you a family car, daily driver with bags of performance. But if you could really only have one car, you can get your kicks out of this Urus, you really can. Or am I just getting old? I think I'm getting old. My back hurts too much. But one thing that really does impress you about the Urus is the ability to drive this car every day, because when you take it out of Corsa or Sport and put it into Strada, it does just feel like a normal car. You can drive it every day quietly with all the space that you need. It's just ticks every box, really. So the $1 million question: is the Urus worth twice as much as the RS Q8? Well, it's not twice as much anyway, is it? Because list price to list price, there's only about 60,000 difference. But unfortunately, you need to spend 30 or 40,000 pounds on option with the Urus to make it the car that you really want. So it is twice as much. Is it worth it? Well, to drive, that does 9/10 of that car. It really is that good. It's an absolutely fantastic car. But what price is on exclusivity? The Lamborghini, it's rarer, it's angrier, it's more exciting to drive. So, if you only have one SUV in the family and you want a car that ticks most boxes, fantastic. Better alternative than an SVR or a Cayenne Turbo. But if you want something that is really, really, really special, and you maybe have other cars in the family as well, got to be the Urus.